After God drove man out, He placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword, flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. God had expected more out of man, and He wanted man to be set apart for God alone. Set apart for God was also referred to as being holy. Satan with his demons stopped at nothing to separate and would tempt man using all their powers. Temptation was allowed here on earth to assess the heart. It was essential to know the weak points to protect the soul. Satan and his demons made it their number one job to know the name and the weak points of each man, woman, and child. Satan did this to isolate and then separate man from God, the source of all love. And his angels did this to unify. Just as scar tissue from old wounds leaves the skin stronger, these tests, if man made it through them, would leave them stronger in the end. This first test did exactly that for Adam and Eve. The entire experience with this paradise pet that turned into being a deadly dragon had been most traumatizing, so deeply etched into the brain and the heart, and they would do whatever it took to avoid this phony, fake liar. Now, note that God moved man out of the paradise environment so that he would undergo more grieving. The betrayal and the necessary discipline and banishment was heartbreaking to God. But the source of all wisdom and love knew what He had to do to help mankind stay focused and thus connected. New rules with reasons. Man was moved from the abundant Garden of Eden, and he was given a harder ground to work. Therefore, man could not be successful without daily intervention from the Father, and thus building daily communication. With this new scenario, there was less free time inside 24 hours. Man would get to enjoy the earth, but not have so much vacation time. Less time to get in trouble. Hard work has a way of facilitating the focus and single-mindedness on the source. After the banishment, things would be different in that God would be invisible, and Adam would have to search for God's face in the clouds. He would not see Him walking in the garden, but the good news was that God did not completely remove His presence, and in time, man would readjust to the invisible, and the spiritual could almost feel Him by his side from time to time. This awe-inspiring appreciation is what man had misplaced in paradise. And now, if Adam could just sense His lead or even catch a glimpse of His smile from the heavens, it created a flood of appreciation in the heart, the thing that they had taken for granted at one time. The fall of man had left such an impression that Adam and Eve never wanted to be disconnected again, and certainly never lose favor with the Most High God. No more shorts in the electrical lines that connected them both. God's disappointment was the worst experience in the world. Now later, Adam and Eve had their firstborn son and named him Cain. Eve was connected to God, and so in humility she said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. This was the first family, and Cain and Abel grew to manhood. Cain worked the soil like his father. He was a farmer, but Abel herded the flocks. Now Adam and Eve adored God, And part of what God had taught them to do is stay appreciative and to give back some of what had been given them. This was an excellent exercise for the heart of every man, woman, and child. And the way it works is that you literally count your blessings. Take inventory of what God had lavished upon you, then divide it into tenths, and then bring a tenth back to God as an offering. It was really a misnomer to call this an offering or a sacrifice, as if you actually sacrificed something you had given yourself or you had created. Since it was all a gift in the first place, this was more like payments on borrowed riches. This was never about giving to God, for the source of all needed nothing, but rather regular accounting of all that God does and gives to each of us to maintain the essential characteristic of appreciation, which of course maintained the connection to the life force. Everything God asked for was only to help man live forever. An amazing offer. So in God's genius, the banishment and redirection had reconnected Adam and Eve, and they now looked for God's lead, His guiding spirit, morning, noon, and night. It was automatic to stay focused up for everything. But the main thing they looked to Him for was favor, for it was like a meter to read the strength of this all-important connection. Favor was what they almost lost through anti-authority. Favor, it's the gift of the connection and makes life worth living. It motivates man to get up every day, and it is a good desire, and it fills the soul. But Lucifer knew that disfavor would make the world go crazy, create hate, chaos, manslaughter, and suicide. Now, Lucifer had waited in the background where it concerned Adam and Eve, for their connection with God was growing stronger every day. And both Adam and Eve, and especially Eve, now disdained Lucifer and would run from his presence. The old snake had no idea his well-thought-out attack would have backfired and wound up making the man-God connection stronger in a roundabout way. This was curious, and Lucifer could not figure it out, thinking it random. And because he could never connect to truth, he was undeterred, and he just kept plotting the next victim. But one thing he did know was that he loved children. Children were so much better prey, for they were tender and also whiny and readily pouting or feeling sorry for themselves. So Lucifer and his demonic forces hung around Cain and Abel. Now, Cain and Abel had been such a blessing of healing for Adam and Eve. Children got their mind off their huge, shameful mistake in the garden. Children are such joyful assets to the family that most parents do not want to ever dampen their enthusiasm. Therefore, they were not inclined to bring back up past humiliating temptations and lost battles or stories of Lucifer and his deceitful victory in paradise. But they did teach their children the joy of authority, and Abel seemed to stay focused on God, never looking to the right or the left, even though he was the younger brother. Likewise, Cain was aware of Lucifer, yet recently he had grown more and more skeptical of the danger of the old snake, for he had never seen him rebel or be divisive. So he left more and more battle armor at home. This lack of preparation would turn out to be a grave mistake. It all started when Cain would hear voices, and he really did not think much of it. The twisted thoughts were so random and spaced apart that they were not alarming enough to tell the folks. He used to bring everything to his earthly authority, his dad, and they were very close at one time. But this had changed with physical maturity. Cain wanted some space and independence. Now, one day, while working the garden, a viper who was hiding behind the leaves of the vegetables jumped out, struck, and bit Cain's arm with full force. To Cain, it was a small bite, and for some reason it did not hurt. In fact, it strangely felt good. Cain did not think too much of it, and he had a warm feeling come over him as his eyes opened to the work of his own hands. The crops that were once a gift from God were now a result of his ingenious farming techniques. Cain felt pride in his work. In fact, he thought for the first time that his work appeared superior to his father's harvest. From this point forward, he commenced to put more faith in his own ideas than the guidance of the force, who often gave tips through his earthly authority. The effects of the venom were slow but sure. Prayer, which was at one time constant, seemed to be more of a rule or a religious ritual than an interchange for essential daily direction. Adam and Eve as parents had not picked up on anything other than Cain seemed to be more to himself, talked less about what the source was revealing to him, and he was not as enthusiastic about the times that they would gather together to count their blessings. In the course of time, at one of the appreciation gatherings, when the family had counted all that God had given them, Abel joyfully brought the 10th of a fat portion from some of the best firstborn of his flock. But a voice from the dark side warned Cain to hold back. And so Cain brought a stingy portion of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Now, the ancient scriptures say the following. Now, the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." Well, instead of the great I Am cutting Cain off, he gave him the perfect advice. Sin is crouching at your door, and it desires to have you, but you must master it. This advice, if heeded, would have saved him from all the grief that was about to occur. But with both radios on and the message was blurred, Cain remained downcast, which means depressed. Notice that the lack of favor from God is the source of depression. The lack of favor from God makes a man depressed. And God did not offer Cain Prozac or pills, but rather personal responsibility. That was the solution to depression. God made it clear, you change and get it right, and then you can have the favor back, the connection back, and the smile back on your face. This is simple. This is clear. This is pure religion. Now, at least Cain could still hear what God said, but it was not penetrating. Cain was close enough to God that he could sense the lack of favor on his behavior. At least Cain was looking for favor, but he was also listening to the ancient serpent. Satan's poison, if not quickly treated with anti-venom of truth, will always paralyze its prey. So Satan bit again. This time, it was not an attack on authority. Cain had heard that lesson before. It was a new attack. It was the venom of jealousy, projection, and judgment toward a peer. Cain had lost the ability to look inward. He was unable to receive correction. The heart that is impenetrable just projects outward, but not just projects. I've seen this. It spews, it spits out judgments in a bitter way. He was not just mad because God did not look at favor on his offering, but he was mad because God did look at favor on Abel's offering. He was jealous. And Lucifer whispered, "It's Abel's fault. He's making you look bad." Lucifer used the following concept. Abel made an A on the test, and Cain made a C or an F. If one could just get rid of the A student, then God would curve the test and his C would be an A. All the demons turned loyalty into evil. Saints that were not blinded by the hate could see through Cain's nasty judgmentalness and could see the truth about Abel, that this holy saint had set apart his heart, his soul, his mind, and his strength to serve God alone. His offering was an outpouring of an adoring relationship with God. In fact, Abel had grown to have a great connection with God and could not wait to give his offerings as they were opportunities to be the apple of God's eye. Some would call this concept faith. On the other hand, Cain was covered over with whispering demons. He had opened the door, so his depression quickly turned to anger. Cain had listened to Lucifer so much that he was sure he was right. Abel was evil, and his actions were righteous. Abel was a threat to religion. Abel was divisive. Lucifer had done it again. Good was evil, and evil was appropriate judgments. So on a very dark day, Cain was eaten up with jealousy, and he said to his loving, unsuspecting brother Abel, "Let us go out to the field." It would be the last day on earth for Abel. It was the last day to see his family, and the last day Adam and Eve would enjoy his presence. For while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Because of the sin of Cain, Adam and Eve lost both sons in one day. One was dead and buried in the ground, and one was banished from home. Oh, the grief of sin, the broken hearts, and the sea of tears it brings. This sent a shockwave through the heavens. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Well, Cain had killed the physical, but not the spiritual. Death could not separate God from his beloved Abel. With the second sin on earth, God asked the same question, "What have you done?" God did not ask Adam and Eve about their parenting. He did not ask what Abel had done. God did not address Satan this time, for Cain should have been aware of the schemes of Satan. No, God asked Cain the standard judgment day question for all of mankind. What have you done? Cain, like Adam and Eve, had enough of the blinding venom in them that they forgot that God was omnipresent. So Cain gave an impertinent answer, showing that he had no remorse for murder and still in the justifiable judgment projection mode. The perfect and loving God gave the first pronouncement or verdict on the rebellion that led to the first murder. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Well, Lucifer makes it his job to know everything about a potential prey. The ancient serpent, the dragon, had been watching and waiting for just the right moment for years. And Adam and Eve and Abel did not see this coming, and Cain did not see this coming either. Lucifer knew the Cain syndrome. There was something about man's work that left weak spots to inject the deadly virus of pride. It seemed too easy to just offer flattery, which initiated sensual desire for more, selfish ambition, the temptations that required disconnection from the Lord of all. Greed for praise of man, which belongs to God, and greed to make more money, to gather as many riches and cars and technological gadgets as he wanted. Satan lied and said that you have to hold back on giving to God, and you have to selfishly store up more for yourself. Man praise others because they want them to praise their works. It's called humanism. Cain had created the wrong kind of competition with Abel. Cain had taken the venom and lost faith and believed in the self-preservation bent. Lucifer had perfected projection inside Cain to the point that he could not point a finger at himself. Murder is the result of projection. Cain killed his own brother because Cain felt that Abel purposely made him look bad. Poor reasoning. Cain would have been better off to let Abel live and just continually try to imitate Abel's behavior until he got it right, mastered the sin in his heart, and restored the connection and favor of God. Cain killed Abel because he knew down deep that he was not going to change. He would try to change the system of approval first. In other words, Cain wanted to change the laws and the grace of God and was trying to get the great professor to curve the test, so he got rid of the A student to help the whole class out. Now, with Abel gone, or so Cain thought, God would have sympathy. But little did he know, God does not curve these tests on earth. Instead, God told Cain that sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Satan lies to you and says, you are just human, and it's impossible to do what God wants you to do. Impossible to obey. Obedience is a work, and God does not want you to work. Satan has bitten the religious world so much that this lie paralyzes and permeates almost all religions. How can one believe this lie of Satan when all God is offering is for you to take his hand so that he can lovingly walk you through the desert of testing to an oasis of life? So you think you cannot be led by the loving hand of God? It's all too hard? You want the black control of death so much that you pull back from the hand of life? It seems impossible to miss this truth. Sin is crouching at your door. But you must master this. Quit trying to get God to change and no longer offer his loving hand to pull you out of the fire. Anger and depression, a downcast feeling, comes from wanting it both ways. You want your own decisions with God's favor and his money to back you or to support your sensual desires. Both ways approval of God while playing God. You can find people who will tell you feeling depressed is an illness and out of your control. But just as quickly as depression comes from sin, joy comes from repentance. Yes, Cain changed many things, but not the right thing. Cain chose to challenge God, to talk back to God, to avoid the questions. Cain chose to get rid of the A student and murder. And in the end, what Cain and all the persecutors find out from doing this type of thing is that you cannot accomplish your goal by killing righteous people, for their blood cries out. You cannot kill their reputation, nor their connection with God. They're still going to, with their righteous life, condemn what you're doing. The message of the martyrs become even more powerful upon death, and their testimonies speak louder even today. Cain wanted two masters, but take it from me, you cannot have it both ways. The biggest reason that God does not rule on earth today, as Jesus has prayed, is that people divide their devotion between the God and their idols. And so then they wind up picking and choosing commands, or halfway doing what God wants, and then playing king of their own life. That's you being the master. I want to make it clear. God is not ruling you at all. You're in control. And you cannot be a master and have God as your master at the same time. Jesus said no one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot get rid of the genuine articles, the ones that convict and condemn the world. Centuries after the death of Abel, his righteousness speaks on. The Apostle Paul wrote the following in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks, even though he is dead. Well, in conclusion, this was a classic story of the great battle of the ages, good versus evil. How do you resist Lucifer in this temptation to project and then judge? How do you go from being a Cain to being an Abel? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Of course you will. But on the other hand, the reverse is true. If you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. Abel obeyed because he loved God, and Cain struggled with the sacrifice because he loved himself more than God, and therefore did not pass the test. Many of us have the Cain syndrome, so that we give to God what we want to give, not what he asked for. We get angry at God for asking us to sacrifice the thing we love. Moreover, just as Cain did, we get angry at God for not being happy with what we've decided to give him. If you do not do what is right, if you do not do what is right, don't you see what is happening to you, your children, anyone that's not doing in the process right now, doing what is right? The desires and the demons will come near you. They will insert their venom, and they will master you. And they will own you, and they will ruin your life on earth and your connection with eternity. If you do what is right, however, you will not judge and you will master it. Remember what Jesus said. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. The reason judgmentalness is so wrong is that it is murder in the heart, which comes from the evil one, and it shows you are disconnected. You must reverse this. You must repent. You must get connected to the love, and that's how you master this. How else do you master it? Again, listen to what God is saying. It is profound. In the 4th chapter of the Bible, the 4th chapter gives you everything that you need to make it. It's doing what is right. Do you want the connection? Do what is right. Take God's hand and let Him guide you. Upon the first sin in the garden and the first redirection, Adam had more suffering with his work, but at least he had a job. But now Cain's redirection would be that he basically could have no successful job anymore. No fruitful employment. Nothing prosperous. He would be like the homeless, a vagabond, wandering around, restless. What was God doing? God was redirecting Cain, but the purpose. God was removing the success to remove the pride. Remember, if pride is eradicated, Satan's whispers are nothing but wind, and then your eyes will stay on the heavens where they belong. Cain then could look back on this experience and say, if only I could have had a connection again so that I could work the crops. I would give 50% of what I've been given. I would have restored appreciation. But losing everything has a way of turning a judgmental, jealous person into a humble sojourner who is focused on his own salvation and grateful, positive indebtedness to God, appreciative for the smallest thing. Both sins of the first family would be used for the centuries to come so that mankind could avoid the pride of Cain. As stated by our brother John in 1 John, over 1,500 years later, he said, do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. All along, God was there to give life to man. The fallen angel was there to offer death through various ways. In Satan's murderous garden scheme, he would insidiously get Adam and Eve to unplug, and so it would look like an accidental suicide. This works, but better yet, through the Cain Test. Get Cain to unplug and then blame the pain, not on God this time, but other men. Therefore, letting men murder and hate men. Ingenious. Blame and projection are the best tools by far. So whether the garden or the Cain Test, the great dragon was on a roll. Either blame on God or man would always kill. Satan would just have to make sure that he got rid of any voice that put the blame back where it should be, on man, for that would save their soul. Lucifer saw that patience and timing was continuing to pay off to make man feel victimized. so that he would take matters into his own hands. The angels, who were in disbelief from the whole event, regrouped and tried to get ready for the future onslaughts of Satan's army. Lucifer, however, quickly spread his demons far and wide and repeated the garden attack and the Cain attack all throughout the earth.
We sing praises to Ya, to the one true God. We sing hallelujah. I remember everything, how you carried us on eagle's wings. You are love, but still the world looks on and says, what can it mean?